Chapter 14. Life's Love Melody. Music, like everything that is fundamental in life, partakes of the heart or feeling, of the mind or thought, of the sense or physical expression, and can never be of any one plane of being, but ever must embody all three. We might go farther and say that there are four great planes of being, or states of consciousness in human life. The elemental objective or physical state wherein man is under the control of his sense nature. The rational or mental plane wherein man uses his mind to think, reason, and form judgments. The psychic, which might be defined as an intermediate state between the mental and the spiritual nature, partaking more or less of both, sometimes giving clearer vision and deeper insight, and again, when misused, acting as a barrier to higher development. The spiritual consciousness, or that state of being in which man realizes his at-one-ment with God. It is in this state that what is known as cosmic consciousness is attained, to which I made fuller reference in a former chapter. This spiritual consciousness may be said to be the crowning development in the life of man on this plane of being. All planes must be considered as necessary stages in the development or evolution of man, and from first to last there are varying degrees in music fitted to the needs of every plane. Some have thought that music is purely emotional, but it is much more than this. Sometimes it may contain emotion to a greater degree, and again it may be said to be as much a product of mind as of emotion. The soul of music is emotion, but the body or form it takes is an expression of thought. Music may have so much of the mentality of the composer in it that it loses its power to awaken the inner emotions of the listener, and yet an individual of a developed mentality can enjoy it as he might enjoy a book or a lecture, solely for its mental stimulus. Music, in its earliest stages, appeals to man more largely through his sense nature than in any other way, but, as its evolution continues, the appeal to the mind comes with it, and still later, as it begins to express something of the higher or spiritual side of life, it appeals to the heart or to the higher love nature in man. I feel sure that the music which awakens the deepest emotions in life must affect the whole man, spiritually, mentally, and physically. I believe any action that awakens man's higher emotional nature lends itself, also, to a greater mental perception and increased mind activity, as well as to a renewing and strengthening of man's physical organism. When this knowledge comes to be an accepted fact, people will strive more and more to awaken their higher emotions. For the real perfection and strength of life must come through such renewing. Some may contend that the music which awakens the spiritual or intellectual activities has but a momentary effect, lasting only while one is listening to it. There may be very full enjoyment for the time, but when the music ceases, the effects are soon lost. I do not for a moment accept this as truth. I believe the effect of the music has become a real and permanent possession of the listener, a part of those riches that are stored away in the subconscious mind. Furthermore, if music will induce even a temporary state of thought and feeling, temporary states may become permanent. When, through thought and feeling, there is once established a definite habit, it becomes comparatively easy to retain the impression, which then sets up a new rate of vibration in man's spiritual, mental, and physical life. Listening to such music a number of times will tend to make the vibration permanent. For, when the life of man vibrates from the emotional to the mental, and from the mental to the physical, then such a condition sets up causes which result in perfect health of mind and body. Music has not as yet been given its proper place. When we come to understand it aright, we shall know that there is no one other influence in human life that can be so effective for good, that, through its aid, the very highest aspirations can be called into being, and the latent power in man developed and used to a far greater degree than man has as yet dreamed of. In fact, there are possibilities to be disclosed through the influence of music that man as yet has not even conceived, but in the near future he is going to realize many of these hidden powers and use them in directing his own life. When the influence of music is brought to bear in a direct way for the accomplishment of definite ends and purposes, then we shall realize something of the real power that music exerts upon life. In the near future, music will be made to soothe and comfort the weary, both of mind and body. It will uplift the sorrowful, bring hope to the despondent, inspire and encourage to action, and cause people who are spiritually and mentally blind to see and to open their ears that they may hear. I have referred in the beginning of this chapter to varying planes of consciousness. The man or the woman on any one of these varying planes of consciousness whose feelings are not affected by music has not lived life in a vital way. Neither can it be said that such people have entered into the real joys or pleasures of life, since rhythm, melody, and harmony are all necessary to every plane of living, and the one who is rounded out on any plane, from the physical up, must have entered into the joys and sorrows of life, as conveyed through the medium of music. It is not in living the partial life that one is able to enter into and appreciate life at its full. The well-ordered life is rounded out by the ability to enter into and get good from everything. Whatever we know ourselves to be deficient in, that is the one thing we should try to cultivate. Life can only be understood in a whole, and in a complete way through knowing it and living it. We may say that we can profit to some degree by the experience of others, but after all, it is only the one who has lived who really knows, and life is intended to be lived to its full, not in some things, but in everything that will make for harmonious living. In striking the keys of life, we shall not always produce harmony, but it is through the constant practice that the real knowledge and harmony is attained. We should remember, too, that whatever we bring to life we receive from it again. The discords we create for others come back to us redoubled. The harmonies we are able to bring to brighten and uplift our fellow men are returned to us in an increased way to bless and to comfort our own lives. This is the law, and all may reap the joy and the gladness of life, the love and the hope of life, if they so will. We come to know and understand things, or people aright only through learning to love them. It is through loving understanding that the clouds of life are dispelled and the real appreciation of any thing or person comes. So, if any person be lacking in what some term the musical sense, let him desire to know, to understand, and to feel music, and through such desire must come the love and the appreciation of music, and this in turn will tend to the enlargement of his mental and spiritual horizon. Sometimes we speak of people as being discordant. A discordant person is one who is not attuned, one in whom the melody, rhythm, and harmony of life are absent. To produce a chord, it will be necessary to establish all three. While each individual is a unit, the unit may be said to have three phases through which it expresses itself: soul, mentality, and sense. Love and the deepest feelings of joy, faith, hope, and peace are all soul states. Logic, imagination, thought, reason, and judgment are all mind states. While the five senses are most closely allied to man's physical organism, as all three fulfill their purpose, man strikes the major chord of his being. If he is using mind and sense alone, the two only make an incomplete chord. The great object of life must ever be to produce a full chord, and, having done this on any scale of being, man is preparing the way for the sounding of a new chord on a still higher octave or plane of being. The fundamental note of the highest music in life is love. It is like the white ray which, when broken up, discloses the 7 prismatic colors. So love, when differentiated, expresses itself through faith and hope, through peace and joy, through goodness and gentleness, and all these give to life its real character and its rhythm, its melody, and its color. Life is a constant process of development. One step taken in the right direction brings with it the necessary vision for still another. The ideals we hold in mind are always a little beyond our performance, and with every effort we make to live life in the best possible way, the ideal is ever enlarging. We never arrive at any ultimate end, for what seems to be the end of one phase of living is only the beginning of another. Progress is eternal. Soul-satisfying music must come from the soul, for only in this way can music become the universal language that can be heard and understood by all people. The thoughts expressed through words, whether those words be spoken or sung, do not necessarily tell their story to ears unfamiliar with the language used. But when heart speaks to heart from the depths of inner feeling, then none are so deaf but that they may hear. Music may be made such a potent factor that it will awaken the very highest feelings in the life of man, and through the awakening will come a life such as he was intended to live from the beginning. The whole life will become a vibrant melody filled with the real joy of living. If we could only realize that as life progresses there is an ever-increasing wonder of music and color, but that only through inner development can come the appreciation of it, then we should look forward, not with doubts and fears to sorrowful or painful or evil consequences that may befall us in the future time, but with pleasurable anticipation to the greater joys that we know await us. The greatest of all music must be the product that comes, as it were, directly from the soul. Music that is colored by the highest emotions. All music that changes and passes away is of the purely superficial emotional kind, which may produce disturbances of mind and body, but never affects man's soul for good or for ill. As the soul can only recognize the real in the music of life, the more we use the highest and best music we already have, the more shall we be able to enter into that higher consciousness from which all divine music is drawn. Every great composer, poet, painter, or sculptor has, at one time or another in his life, done certain work that, in a way, transcended that which his mind was able, in a sense, to conceive. It was as though something else worked within him to will and to do, that his work was more an expression of his deepest feelings than his best thought. Although his thought was necessary to the giving of form to his work, nevertheless, the work held far more of what he had felt than of what he had thought. We call this inspiration, and inspiration is drawn from one great source. It comes through the soul, the individual being brought into contact with the universal soul. It is through such contact that the highest state of feeling in man's soul is brought into activity, and in turn, this activity becomes the factor that is going to renew the mind of man, and through this renewing power will come the true outer expression of whatever one is doing, be it music or poetry, painting or sculpture. The expression takes its form from the new and living ideal that has entered the mind from the divine source of being. It is told that Fra Angelico gave himself up to hours of prayer before he began to paint, and one need only to look at his pictures in order to feel something of that sanctity and ideality he was able to put into them. Michelangelo, too, must have been inspired when he painted the wonderful frescoes of the Sistine Chapel and his Last Judgment, also when he sculptured the incomparable statue of Moses. Beethoven's symphonies, at times, seem to have been inspired by something which transcended the mind of man, and Wagner, in certain parts of his operas that have to deal with the more spiritual side of life, is able to appeal to the very highest and deepest within the life of man. Every original production, if it be truly great, is drawn from universal consciousness, and is as much a product of what is called inspiration as the sacred writings are. In the cosmic consciousness is contained every plan and every ideal that is later to become expressed through man and take form as a thing of power and beauty on earth. It is in this way that we become the channel through which God works, and the great work, in so far as it is perfect, is the work of God expressed through heart and mind and hands of man. Its imperfections are solely occasioned by man's limitations. Those who are ready to receive inwardly and to express outwardly all they receive are the people who will be in line to receive the still greater ideals. It is always through the use of the knowledge and the power of which we are in possession that we prepare ourselves to receive still greater knowledge and power. The worker, no matter in what field he may be engaged, should always seek to give expression to the very highest within him, and it will be through doing this that his greatest joy in life will come. Talented composers should cease writing all music that panders to man's lower instincts. But again I say, if there were no demand for such music, it would not be written. The public gets what it asks for. When the world demands the best, it will get the best. There are some countries where the people want to listen to the best music. Consequently, when they go to the gardens, parks, or public places where music is to be heard, they get the best. As yet, in our own country, the great mass of people are satisfied with music that is elemental in nearly all of its characteristics, and such music cannot be expected to uplift either spiritually or mentally. There are many engaged in trying to cultivate among people a greater love for good music, but what with the trashy music written by those who do not understand the first principles of music, and the people who are content to listen to it, the way of the reformer is both a hard and a difficult one, and our composers derive but little incentive from the public in the way of real appreciation of their work. One of our most talented, as well as idealistic composers, Edward MacDowell, up to a very recent date, was more fully appreciated abroad than in his own country. We have too few composers in our country to neglect any of them. Why should Americans not become great in music as well as in so many other avenues of life? I know quite well some of the objections to be met with. First, that we are utilitarian and commercial in our tastes and desires, that a deadly realism prevails the country over, that the sense of symmetry and beauty is very largely deficient. But surely there are enough idealists in this great country who are unwilling to prostitute their idealism to prevailing materialism, who, working unitedly together for a higher order in every walk of life, could create new desires and new tastes in the public mind so that the love of beauty in art, drama, and literature might become the greatest factor for mental, moral, and spiritual uplift. Ideals rule the world, and the few who stand true to their ideals will eventually see the multitude coming out to learn of them, just as surely as the multitude of people went out to John the Baptist in order to learn of him when he was living in the wilderness. Life only becomes grand and beautiful when we bring the grand and beautiful to bear upon it, when we make a courageous and persistent effort to give expression to the highest ideals we are capable of receiving. The value of such ideals may not at once be recognized by an indiscriminating public, even though we work our hardest to express them. It is difficult to make the world see anything that is close at hand. The perspective of years is needed before people are ready to build monuments to the great souls who have lived true to their ideals, and who have given far more to the world than they have received from it. But compensation, whether it comes in one way or another, is absolutely sure of coming to the one who lives up to his highest conviction of truth. The life that is lived with the one object of giving to the world the highest and best it has to give is doing far more for its real development than could possibly be done in any other conceivable way. To the one who seeks to impart of his riches, greater riches are always being added. It is the privilege of the composer or the musician to give what he has to give to the world as fully and as freely as he has received it. And in the doing of this, his soul is being kept open to a continual influx of music from the realms of life and light so that, finally, he becomes attuned to all the wonder and the glory of rhythm, melody, and harmony that is in the great cosmic consciousness. End of chapter.